Hey y'all, thanks again for joining another awesome panel. This is a panel of 9/11 veterans in our movement basically since looking at 9/11. So I want to do some reflection over the last 20 years of where we are as a movement, what things have changed throughout the last 20 years, how 9/11 has affected veteran organizing, and where we're headed in the future. So we have a really, really large panel. So I want to apologize up front. I'm not going to give very in-depth introductions to each person coming on, but I want to dive into this and get some good content right away. The first person I want to bring up, Frank. I know I canceled your camera, but if you can turn it back on and turn on your camera. I'm going to bring you up first. Frank was one of the first VFP members that I built a relationship with because Frank was in Philadelphia, and the IVAW office was set up there originally in the basement of the American Friends Service Committee building. Frank was essential, being part of the board and involved with the staff. And let me see if I can start your camera. I can ask you to start it, but might take a minute. But hey, you're on. Frank, it's just building a friendship with you and being one of our mentors was absolutely essential for those beginning years with IVAW. It's still great to see you today being active and doing things. Maybe you could help us first. I want you to give me more of an introduction about yourself, but also after that, maybe you could talk to us about what the state of the veteran anti-militarism activism was like before 9/11. And what changed, like what happened, even maybe the day of 9/11, what your thoughts were and how kind of this movement had moved because of that kind of tragic moment. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, Garrett. Like Garrett said, I'm in here in Philly, and I retired. I left my elementary teaching in right around 2000, and then that let me open to when Michael Hoffman showed up. He was, showed up back from Iraq. He lived outside of Philly, and he found us here in Philly. And then, so a few years, later, when he asked me to man the office with Amadi Braxton, who was the brains of the operation, and building IVAW from those original 8 folks, Kelly being one of them. And so I was able to do it. I was really fortunate in my circumstances then to be able to give my time, and that was a wonderful years for me to be able to feel so useful, to be able to contribute in that way, and able to be that's my strengths, building relationships, being on the phone with vets, talking to the young new vets, at night and stuff like, just getting their plane tickets and just being there for Amadi, and then later Lovella and Hoffman to just, do whatever was needed. And so, that I was just lucky to be able to provide, to give all that time. And prior to that, when I think back to the state of activism with vets, I think about the 90s with Clinton, and we had just come off brutal years with Reagan in Central America, and oh man, that was tough. That was really tough to live through. It just drove up guys like me crazy. Then what we were doing down there, what we were doing to all those folks in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And then I joined Vets for Peace in '91. Up to that point, I was I didn't want anybody to know I was a vet. I completely hid it. I was absolutely did not want anybody to know I was in the Marines or anything. But when we bombed Iraq the first time, that blew, that really set, boy, that really, at least for Vets for Peace, that was my community. I joined them, and boy, folks had been kind of like quiet and worn down and beat down. You know, they were, man, everybody came out because a lot of vets were experiencing what I was. That just triggered us off and just said, you know, we were really struggling, but we really were active and organized back then during the, you know, of course, Clinton with the genocide going on and with the kids in Iraq during that kept us going. And I mean, back in Philly, it was really a lot of focus was on, you know, the recruiters coming around the high schools, and we were getting in as many schools as we could. Back then, my close friend Bob Hennell and later John Grant, we were, you know, got into schools a lot. That was what I felt was my best thing I could do then. You know, just connect with kids, and you know, before they got sucked into it and fell for all the lies and the glory of war and all that. So it was. I remember Vets for Peace, at least in the 90s. I remember when I left teaching, the first thing I did was invited to go on the first Vets for Peace Iraq Water Project team. And that was in, I believe, October of 2000. And that really, you know, that was intense. That was one of the most intense 2 weeks of my life. And there were some vets, Eric Gustafson, he's epic, and I don't know if anybody following it. Eric does great work in Iraq, you know, and has been ever since. And he was on that trip, and then but that led for me a year later to go to Vietnam for a year. I was able to volunteer for this woman, Sherry Clark, in Vietnam. So when 9/11 happened, I was in Hanoi. I was in a hotel with a bunch of parents that were adopting babies, and I was their shepherd. I was with those parents for a year, like taking them through getting their visas, and you know, just keeping them calm and you know, keeping them moving along. And so we were holed up in a little hotel in Hanoi, and so I wasn't back in the States until 8 months later. So I missed that initial period where everybody, you know, I remember John Grant, you know, talking to me about like how, you know, the pressure on him from the neighborhood to get his flags up and all like that. I was not here for that. And I think if I wasn't for like, you know, my kids and grandkids and all the ties and Vets for Peace, I don't even know if I would have came back from Vietnam then. I would have just stayed there maybe. But then, so how it changed right away, I think I wasn't here. I mean, I was holed up there. But when I came back, well, that led me to IVAW almost right away. And I mean, the vets community was active as hell. I mean, we were all on the streets all over the country then. We were really activated. Well, we were scared. We were terrified of what you know, it was our worst nightmares. We had been at this our whole lives, and then here we are, you know, setting off what we could see, what that was going to set off in the Middle East and the world, just endless war. And so luckily for me, Michael Hoffman showed up, and it gave me that. It gave me that to do. It gave me that way to contribute, you know, with helping help build IVAW for the next whatever years. And yeah, that was, I'm trying, like, as that kind of wound down, I think we've been struggling here in Philly for some years now, trying to get our focus. And a lot of that is we don't have a lot of new blood. And it so happens that worked out that way in Philly. I mean, it just, we're kind of spinning our wheels at this time, but not for any lack of motivation or And it's just we'll get our traction. We'll get back going. We'll find our for me, I need to get back into schools. That's what I do best. And our chapter was focused on that about a year and a half ago. We were getting ready. We were outlining, our trainings and everything, but then that fell apart with the virus. And I would imagine we'll probably I don't know now. Getting back in schools now still might be really tough. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Well, is this what I'm supposed to be doing, Garrett?
Yeah, you nailed it. We're going to address some of that you just talked about, but we're going to instill some new energy in the truth and recruitment effort, and we're going to get you some new members. We already have some new members you just don't know about yet. So thanks, Frank. We'll put you back in here towards the end of the lineup, and maybe you can maybe some of the stuff some other folks say might encourage some thoughts and ideas. So thanks. I want to bring up Kelly Daugherty, who I believe Kelly is the first person that I was in contact with in IVAW. I was serving as a sniper in Iraq at the time, and some allies, friends in the anti-war movement, told me about the formation of IVAW and sent me some emails. And I wrote Kelly. I was like, "Hey, I'm a sniper in Iraq. I don't know if that means I'm a veteran, but I'm against the war." And I was like, "Can I join?" And I think Kelly was one of the first ones to respond to me, saying that I was able to get in to the organization. So I considered myself a member of IVAW, walking around camp and Fob Scunion as a sniper. So Kelly served as not only was co-founder of the organization IVAW, served as one of the first executive directors. I think the first paid executive director, at least, of the organization, I think, and has just been an incredible friend ever since. So, Kelly, you're a hero of mine. Maybe you can talk more about how IVAW came into existence and who was supporting the group in those early days when we were just kind of scrambled and trying to put our heads together from the war.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel, Garrett. And it's good to be here with so many awesome people. So I was deployed to Iraq from 2003 to 2004. I got back in that spring of 2004. And just for me personally, I was, as war does, it has a big impact on you. And I was just like, this war is bullshit, like it's horrible and no one seems to care and I should do something. And I didn't know what that was, had never been involved in activism, really didn't know that this whole world existed. And I did know about Veterans for Peace because my father had joined before the invasion of Iraq and had invited me to go to the Veterans for Peace convention in Boston. Back in Colorado, I was living in Colorado Springs at the time, and had got involved. It was also an election year, right? 2004. It was John Kerry was running for president on the Democratic ticket, and I had kind of like been doing some pro-Kerry stuff just because that's the only group of people that I saw in Colorado Springs who were speaking out against the occupation to any extent. But then later in 2004, in that summer, when I went to Veterans for Peace, it just basically blew my mind because I was like, oh my gosh, who are all these people? And they're from all over the country and they're already like, they've been doing all of this anti-war organizing and demonstrating, and really turned me on to just so many people that I didn't know of and this whole community that I didn't know existed. And it was there at that VFP convention in Boston where I met Mike Hoffman and Alex Rybov, and they had both been in the Marines and they had served together. And Jimmy Massey was there. He was also a Marine in Iraq. Tim Goodrich, who was in the Air Force, deployed not to Iraq, but to the arena. I think he was in UAE. I could be wrong on that, but, and then Diana Morrison, who was an Iraq veteran as well. And I remember my main anxiety going into the VFP convention is, as I was preparing to leave and looking on the website, I saw that my name was listed as a presenter on a panel about Iraq. And I was, I had no idea that I was going to be expected to speak about my experience. And that made me incredibly nervous because I had not been doing that. And I felt, I was angry and disillusioned with the occupation, with my participation, but I also had a lot of feelings around guilt of not being a great military police sergeant, and I could have been a better MP, and I don't know, should I even be speaking about my experience? But then meeting those other veterans and having, some of them, I know that Mike Hoffman and I know Tim Goodrich for sure had already been speaking out publicly as veterans against the occupation. So they really helped me just feel more comfortable and more no, it's okay. You should tell your story. It is a worthwhile story to tell. And then found out through Mike Hoffman that they had been in conversation with folks from Vietnam Veterans Against the War and Veterans for Peace, and that they were really providing mentorship to start a post 9/11 veterans organization, and invited me to be a part of that. And so, I was in, and I didn't know what that would mean, but it was there in Faneuil Hall in Boston at the last day of the VFP convention that we announced the formation of Iraq Veterans Against the War. And so that kind of sent me on a whole new path and journey. And I didn't really know what it would mean that we started this organization, but I came back to Colorado and started just trying to meet other veterans to let them know about IVAW and to bring them in. And that's, I began emailing with you, Garrett, and meeting other just, people kind of coming out of the woodwork. Then it was this organization exists. We met Mark Wilkerson, who was AWOL at the time and just so scared and not knowing what to do and feeling like living underground so much. And then other veterans who we met through the Vets for Vets peer support veterans group that had started there in Colorado Springs. And so it was that both building that local community and finding other veterans and being there to support each other. And then, connecting to people across the country through Veterans for Peace and Military Families Speak Out, who are really kind of teaching us and mentoring us and really supporting us. And when I got hired on as the executive director for IVAW, and Jay, my partner, and I moved to Philadelphia, we lived with Frank for however long it took before we could find an apartment. So it was just so many people supporting us in order so that we could share our stories. And then from there, start to actually find our own footing, to organize and to come up with our own strategy and to kind of find our way more independently as recent veterans.
Thank you so much. Wow, bringing up Mark Wilkerson. That's amazing. Thank you, Kelly. You mind if we bring you back on later and you could add some input? I know you've been focusing on your incredible family and your career a lot lately, and we'd love to have your input and your participation back in some of this work, because you have such history and such such experience, and that's very valuable. So, well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And I am not, as you said, I'm not super involved right now, but I have been lifting weights with Shauna Foster, and she just recently started working for About Face. So, I'm still using the movement to help keep me strong.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Well, speaking of I'm going to bring up Jonathan Hutto next. And speaking of Mark Wilkerson, Mark was one of our friends in Colorado Springs who we met. He went AWOL from the military, and there's so much. There's so many GI resistors we don't know, but a lot of them we do touch. And our next presenter, Jonathan Hutto, we met through his activism organizing active duty military. And I feel like we've always kind of had this belief in Veterans for Peace, at least I do, that when service members refuse to fight, that is when wars stop. And it is essential to do more organizing, I think, on and around military bases and support the folks who do actually make that courageous step to resist. Jonathan Hutto helped create the Appeal for Redress back in 2008. And it was a tool to organize active duty military. And it was found basically a loophole to be able to activate them in a safe way, to give them that power to be courageous and bring a lot of different people together in this movement. So Jonathan, thank you for coming on. The work you've done and are doing is inspiring. Can you please tell us more about what is and what inspired the Appeal for Redress? And most importantly, what is its relevance in this hour, given the challenges that we face?
Awesome. Garrett, thank you. And thank Veterans for Peace, the executive leadership and the board there for, and most importantly, the foot soldiers for bringing together this conference, this national conference. I have a strong sentiment for Veterans for Peace historically. Looking back at the Appeal for Redress, the leadership of Michael McPherson and Sherry Eichels and Betsy Resnick and that staff at that time, it was very critical to what we were able to do. And it's good to be connected to and connected eternally to the fighters that are on this line. Good to see you, Kelly, and others. So the Appeal for Redress, which was launched in the fall, approximately October 23rd, 2006. It was the outgrowth of struggle that I was engaged in on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt when I was deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was deployed on that aircraft carrier from September 1st of 2005 to March of 2006, the middle of March. Those deployments back then were about 6.5 months. Now they're about 9 months. In the Navy at the time, about 6.5, and that doesn't count the operations, the train operations that go into that. But then, before I even get into that struggle, let me say that ultimately the Appeal for Redress was inspired by the GI movement. Okay, I had been an activist and an organizer prior to enlisting in the United States military. That's important to note, and I'm gonna park that for a minute. I'll come back to that. But the struggle that I was engaged in on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt, really, it points to the struggle that is the Achilles heel of the United States of America at this very hour. And what's happening in the military is a microcosm of that. It is a struggle against racism. It is a struggle against white supremacy. It is a struggle against all forms of oppression. And now we've seen those forces now morph themselves into an organized fascist movement within the military, which we saw at the steps of the Capitol earlier this year. At that point in my military career, I'm gonna use the word career, really journey, on January 10th, 2006, off the coast of Iraq, having a hangman's noose dangling in front of my face. It was the culmination of struggle that had been taking place in my shop up to that point. And I have to note a professor from Howard University, his name is Rodney Green. He's a veteran of the GI movement. He was drafted out of Yale University in 1969. And because of his membership in the Progressive Labor Party, which ideologically was committed at that time to, if you were drafted, to actually go into services and organize. That was their position in 1969. This gentleman then became an economics professor at Howard a decade later, and then came into my trajectory in the mid to late 90s. as a professor that I didn't take them for a class, but I networked with activist professors when I was an undergraduate student. That relationship became very vital and very pivotal when I was active duty, because it was because of Rod that I was even able to stay in the Navy. I was about to go AWOL myself because of the intensified racism on the ship. It was Rod who helped to strengthen, was very critical to helping to strengthen me staying on the ship and building a base among other shipmates who were facing other challenges, basic grievances. And then this book here became very critical. Soldiers in Revolt. We honored David on yesterday. I want to thank the executive leadership of Veterans for Peace for recognizing David in that way, the Howard Zinn Award. But this book became very critical. And I want to read a quick piece from it. I'm going to tell you why it became critical, because it's really a manual that can guide us today at this very hour. On page 238, because one of the things that I think hampers the left is at times, I believe, and we can agree to disagree on this, but I believe at times we can become somewhat purist in the way in which we engage the moral challenges of our day, okay? The reality, the only difference between the environment, the social milieu that I found in the military when I was there versus what's taking place today is that element has begun to organize itself, right? I mean, it was there then. It was very, very much there. It was latent. It was very much present. But David lays out a couple of key points. Believe it or not, his first point, he says one of the best prescriptions for the post-Vietnam GI movement. He said, number one, he said radicals must join the army. Can you believe that? In other words, the GI movement a generation ago didn't just pop up out of anywhere. There were people who actually were prepared to organize within the military to bring the war machine to a halt, believe it or not. And best chronicled probably by the late Andy Stapp. Let's hold him up against the brass. The amazing story of the fight to unionize the United States Army. This was the American Service Members Union that was organized a generation ago, best captured by John Catalano in his book, Turn the Guns Around. Number two, civilian support is crucial to this. Civilian support being organizations, peace and justice organizations, like Veterans for Peace, which has associate members with other organizations as well. Number three at that time, the movement must deal with the basic grievances of the GI. One of the major basic grievances is the fight against racism, okay? And the fight against sexism, and the fight against all forms of oppression, homophobia, all forms of oppression. That being stated, when I read this book, I was able to see the nexus between the anti-racist fights that I'm engaged in on the ship connected to the fight against war and the fight against all forms of imperialism. Not only was I able to make the connection, but then we invited David to come to Norfolk, Virginia, right at the end of our deployment, to speak to the peace and justice community there. It was about 15 active duty at that meeting. One of those persons was Liam Madden, a Marine out of Quantico, Virginia, who he and I built the bond, and it was a fusion that took place there that then led to the launch of the appeal for redress. I'm going to end this in about 2 to 3 minutes. I know we got other people. Let me just say this. The loophole that Garrett spoke to was several loopholes, the major one being the Military Whistleblower Protection Act, which states that any active duty member without prior command approval and absent any reprisal for doing so can contact a member of Congress on any issue. That was the basis of the appeal for redress. That Military Whistleblower Protection Act says you can blow the whistle on issues, you can contact your member of Congress. So we were looking for a legally protected way, in a way that was not as ideological, but was very legally driven, and one that was cut across the broad breadth of military members. And what the Nation magazine chronicled in January 2007, in their front page piece, on the appeal for redress, it's called About Face actually, was the breadth of it. You had some people, they interviewed about 40 plus persons on the ground there, and mostly in Iraq, and who were supporters of the appeal. And there was a broad breadth of support for different reasons. For some, it was ideological, meaning opposition to war. For some, it was opposition to imperialist war. For some people, it was very personal. It was some people, it's not that I'm against the war. I'm just on my third deployment and my family's falling apart. You know, my wife has left me. I can't be a father to my kids or a mother, you know, so it's all these different, you know, reasons. I want to end by saying this, because Garrett pointed to this as well, you know, the relevance to today. The forever wars of the United States will continue so long as the left is fractured and is not able to build a base amongst the working class, specifically those persons who join the military. We have to have a dual approach. I think the conscious raising and letting young people know their options, that they have options that mean they don't have to join the military to have a good life. That's true. And we need to press upon that. But we also need to recognize the economic compulsion to join the military, okay? We're not gonna be able to obliterate that, I don't believe. So this is where your high school teachers, like Frank earlier, folks like him, college professors like a Rodney Green I mentioned earlier, because within these colleges now, not like a generation ago during Vietnam, where most of your undergraduate students, the overwhelming majority of them came from the privileged background. Let's just say about 3/4 of them at least. Today, you have a strong working class element that goes to college. I was one of them. I graduated college after 4 years and signed a promissory note, $39,000 worth of debt. That's called working class, okay? Some of those persons are still could be potentially recruited to the military. I was. So this is where your professors come in, your high school teachers, relationship building in terms of actually having relationships with those in the ranks who could potentially be organizers for us. I'll stop right there. I'll just say the appeal for redress was an awesome tool. 2,000 plus members who signed it, spanning 10 countries across the globe. And yeah, and we stand ready. Thank you, Garrett.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, it's inspiring. I hope we can recreate work like that and do more of it in the future. So thanks for being with us. Mike Presner, you're up next. I think I met you first was at the Winter Soldier hearing. I can't remember for sure, but that's I think when we first crossed paths. Man, I was a mess back then. And I felt you had yourself put together pretty well. You put an amazing presentation, a testimony on stage there, and you moved on. I wasn't able to make to the Dewey Canyon stuff, but we saw you there, and you really took a lot of your work beyond IVAW. Creating March Forward, getting involved in documentary making, which I think is like the true investigative journalism of this day and age, is creating documentaries and podcasts and streaming, which is like the pirate radio of our time, I think. A lot of people tell me that they've been radicalized by listening to some of the things that you've said or wrote or folks that have seen you, veterans who've been pushed forward in their political education because of some of the stuff that you've done. So Mike, can you talk maybe about the recreation of the 9/11 Winter Soldier hearings, about participating in the Dewey Canyon as major milestones, why it's important to recreate these sort of events, and how did activism switch, especially because you were coming more involved and people were seeing you at a time right when Obama was basically shifting and taking office. What happened then, and how did the environment shift and take it away from other things that you might want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we did meet at Winter Soldier, but I think we are photographed next to each other at marches like back in 2006, 2007. I just don't think we ever talked. And then we were arrested together September 15th, 2007 or 2008. But that, you know, I think the importance of recreating these things. I mean, first of all, similar to Vietnam, it was people needed to know what was really happening. And I think there was an awareness, a consciousness at that time that Iraq veterans, Afghanistan veterans had joined the anti-war struggle and were at the forefront of the anti-war struggle. In fact, just a couple months before the post 9/11, the Winter Soldier Iraq and Afghanistan hearings, there was a massive march in Washington, which I just mentioned, which we were both arrested at. You know, it was about maybe 200 post 9/11 veterans who were leading the march. Many of them were active duty, many of them wearing their uniforms, and a good number of them were arrested pouring over the barricades to the Capitol building. And so there was, I think, visibly, people could see that, oh, there's veterans in the struggle, but they hadn't exactly been heard and heard properly. And at the same time, there was, of course, a total distortion in the media of what was happening in the occupation of Iraq. And so that kind of generated a real need for something like Winter Soldier to happen and subsequent Winter Soldiers to happen afterwards. But I think maybe the more important reason for having it is because, you know, as Jonathan was mentioning, you know, there's always different conditions under which we can organize. And if the goal is to organize active duty people, recently discharged veterans as like an essential part of our movements, you know, there's always different conditions under which to do that and different opportunities. And when Winter Soldiers that have been successful, especially the first Winter Soldier in, what was it, 2009 or 2008, I'm sorry. You know, one of those conditions was you had a lot of soldiers who had been to the war and then would come home and turn on the TV and see what people were talking about and would say, this is not what I experienced. This is a lie. And so you had hundreds of people who wanted to be heard, who wanted to share their experiences and who wanted to talk. And that's why the Winter Soldier bringing it back was such an important organizing opportunity on its own, even though the media still more or less blocked it out. You know, it didn't become the big media scandal that everyone hoped that it would be, that would help bring about the end of the war. It just as a way to organize hundreds of veterans into the struggle. You know, many of people who went to the first Winter Soldier hearings, you know, they hadn't been to a march before. They hadn't been to any anti-war action before, but this was the thing that drew them in. And I know that people that I met at Winter Soldier, I've been in touch with and had a relationship with and did a lot of organizing with ever since. And so it served as a way to pull people into the movement. And that's another reason it's important. And I think that's the big lesson is there's going to be different political conditions and opportunities. They're always going to change. But the goal is to find ways to seize on the opportunities that presents itself. And that's our job as organizers, to be able to, you know, analyze these different conditions and develop new tactics and seize on different opportunities that come up. And that, you know, is a good segue to the issue of Obama and what happened there. So like prior to Obama winning, there was a massive anti-war struggle in the streets. You know, the Iraq war crisis was also very much a Bush crisis. I mean, there were demonstrations like in September 15th, Garrett, when I mentioned you and I were arrested, you know, that demonstration was over 100,000 people marching to the Capitol. I mean, this is a fairly large-sized demonstration, but there's, of course, much bigger ones prior to that. I mean, you'd have like 250,000 people in San Francisco, 250,000 people in Los Angeles. I mean, it was a time of intense mass struggle against the war. And you had massive numbers of veterans and people of all walks of life drawn into that. And just from my observations, you know, say here in Los Angeles, which is where I was when Obama won, you know, we had, you know, we'd call it anti-war demonstration, and it could be like month to month, and you'd get 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 people. And then when Obama was elected, the first anti-war demonstration we held after Obama's election was like 2,000 people. And so it was obviously, there was a big deflation in the conditions which made it possible to draw out massive numbers of people into the street. People felt Obama was going to keep his promise and end the war in Iraq, you know, that wasn't so much paying attention to the escalation in Afghanistan. And so the conditions changed, and the conditions under which we could draw in massive numbers of people into the struggle and draw in veterans and active duty people into the struggle, that changed also. And it didn't mean that, oh, this was everything fell apart because of Obama, stuff like that. There was just, everything changed, and there needed to be a shift and to seize on new opportunities. And there were new opportunities under Obama. I mean, under Obama, you had the kind of militant undocumented youth movement that formed, Not One More, which broke from the mainstream immigrant rights movement and started carrying out militant actions, and veterans became a part of that. There was, of course, the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was a really unprecedented mass movement. And everywhere we were organizing around Occupy Wall Street, there was new veterans, new active duty people who were coming into the struggle because of Occupy and joining like Occupy veterans groups, affinity groups, and things like that. You, of course, had the Black Lives Matter movement, which came about under Obama. And that led to a new surge of people into the struggle, which includes people in the military and veterans. And I remember we had, when the National Guard was deploying to Ferguson, Missouri, we put out an open letter that you could sign saying that if you're in the National Guard or in the active duty military, sign this pledge publicly to say you will refuse orders to go repress demonstrations in Ferguson or anywhere in support of Ferguson. And there was probably like 300 people who signed that on active duty, and predominantly active duty in the National Guard, and some recently discharged people. That was at a time when Obama was president. Anti-war protests were small. There wasn't a huge anti-war consciousness. And so it's easy to get demoralized and defeated when something that is working really well can kind of fizzle out because conditions change. But there's so many new opportunities that always present themselves. And so, of course, things are always changing now. We went through Trump as a weird era, and I think that it's always important to look at little kind of hints of where potential is. And right now, there is some interesting numbers that showed that, like Bernie Sanders, who of course has his contradictions, but ostensibly like the most anti-war candidate, the most left-wing candidate, received more donations from active duty military than like all the other candidates in the Democratic primary combined, including Donald Trump. And there's obviously a new generation in the military. I think there's like a phenomenon of TikToks of people in the military showing how much they hate being in the military. And I think we're entering a situation now where the previous generations that have been in, people who joined after 9/11 with the expectation that they were going to go to war, many of whom with the desire to go to war, but at least with the expectation that I'll be going to war and so forth. That has now ended. We're kind of in a period now that is similar to prior to the Gulf War, where people had joined the military. There hadn't been a war in a pretty long time. People didn't join with the expectation to go to war. They joined with the expectation of getting some college money or whatever. And when the Gulf War kicked off, within a matter of weeks of the Gulf War being announced that it was going to start, there's about 2,500 active duty soldiers who applied for conscientious objector status, and hundreds more who just deserted, who left their units. And in fact, there was a National Guard unit in Texas where they organized a mutiny, and 100 or something of them just left and didn't report for duty. And so I think the active duty military now, going back to what Jonathan was saying, from the standpoint of how do we reach active duty people, it's a condition now where I think in general, the consciousness is more progressive, more left-wing, and also not with the expectation that they'll be going to war. And just I'll end on just a piece of anecdotal evidence there is, when in 2012, around the Afghanistan troop surge, when there's a lot of troop deployments going to Afghanistan, I was helped running a campaign called Our Lives, Our Rights, where we would go on military bases and do outreach saying, don't go to Afghanistan. Here's how you can refuse your orders. And, it received a lukewarm reception. At probably every base we went to and did that, there'd be one soldier who'd say, yeah, I want to be a conscientious objector, and we'd help them get out or whatever. But when Trump assassinated Soleimani, and this is in this different period we're in, a different political climate in the military, different political conditions. When the assassination of Soleimani happened, just because of virtue of the work that I've done in creating anti-war media, I was contacted by not one or two, but probably 40 or 50 active duty service members who were saying, there's no way I'm going to war with Iran. And what are my options to get out of it? And it just showed that there was just, even though it didn't seem, there wasn't an anti-war struggle that involved veterans. It didn't seem that there was a movement in the military, but just with one development that we had no way to predict, there was this kind of massive change of consciousness in the military and a willingness to take a kind of major step, which would be to refuse orders to deploy and come into the anti-war struggle. And so we never know what those moments are going to be, but if we were always kind of constantly assessing the situation, where people are at, the needs and all that stuff, then I think that there's some really exciting opportunities on the horizon as we enter into this new phase.
Thanks, Michael. That's a great analysis. I do forget those moments of opportunity. during the Obama administration, and there were sometimes it feels like we just weren't at the point of connecting all these things, the intersectionality of militarism and all these other struggles. And I feel that's changing. So I want to bring you back up later, because I want more perspective on the future, and I want to ask what you're doing now. But we're going to get to the future stuff in a minute. Next, I'm going to bring up Pam Campos. Pam, you've helped me in a lot of ways look at these intersectional issues and realizing how interconnected they are with anti-militarism. And I feel like in a lot of ways you help represent what we're looking forward in this movement, and what's required to make those connections so we can better take advantage of those moments. And helping creating the Veterans for the People under the Working Families Party, using political action committees and other tools to help make change and build political power for working people and for veterans, I think is so vitally important. So why do you think building that political power through Veterans for the People is important in left veteran spaces? And specifically, maybe you can talk a little bit about another kind of, I wish I didn't pin a lot of these on presidential transformation, because there's so many other factors that maybe you want to address. But obviously, like, Trump coming in was a massive disruption. It feels like so many people were just reacting all the time, daily, to shit coming out of that administration. Maybe you could talk about these things, and if you got more of an intro about Veterans for the People and how people can connect to that, feel free to shoot that out.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. It is so surreal to be speaking on this panel on this day. I have been spending the last weeks and months engaging on the Afghanistan crisis. Isn't a good enough word. And so just want, before I say anything, to acknowledge that that's happening in the background. And for other folks who have connections to the Afghan people, my heart is with you. So much to say about this topic. For those that don't know me, I am former Air Force intelligence analyst, and I've really spent the last 10 years of my life dedicated to answering this question around what if the current foreign policy and national security of the United States does not serve us and is actually the profiteering of death and destruction, then what do we want, right? Throwing rocks at the war machine while also not having alternatives is something that I think about a lot. And I think about conflict, civil conflict, and have a background really in development, diplomacy, and defense. And so I'll start at the beginning real quick just to introduce myself. I am originally from Boston. I am a school to pipeline kid. My mom is an immigrant from Honduras. And when you're the child of an immigrant and your parent says, do anything to get ahead, including joining the military because I want you to get an education, you don't ask questions, you do it. And so I remember being an 18-year-old that wanted to be an artist, but to make my family proud. And also the complicated sense of patriotism that I felt. 9/11 happened when I was in 8th grade. So I was in middle school. And I just remember feeling this complication of being, a brown girl in America that never felt American enough, but also feeling terrorized by that traumatic moment in history. And when the time came for me to enlist, I remember really struggling. The recruiter said, just say no. You have a problem with weed? No. You have a problem with guns? No, right? No means numerous opportunities. And I remember how hard it was to even sign that paper, not knowing what the military was. And so, I started organizing in the military when I was in E4. And I want to be very clear about this because I think, and a lot of my work is about 2 tracks. One is moral injury, and that all of us here know that especially on today, we have never seen, I mean, I have never seen such a visceral exemplification of how war is a scam. It is a scam with the highest costs. And so, of course, I was politicized by war, but I was already politicized before I got into the military. And a lot of my work is to really find our internal power that many of us, you know, were not conditioned out of our humanity. We were not conditioned out of understanding injustice, because many of us grew up working class, or many of us understood violence before we joined the military. And so a lot of my work has really been around these two tracks, which is moral injury around war and ending the war economy, right? And building power to defeat those who are war profiteers in government or in the private sector or wherever they are, right? Destroying their business plan. But the second track is also, what do we do when people have to exist in these systems, right? What do we do with those other E2s and E4s that are in the uniform right now and also need crisis support and management and guidance and leadership development? And so, you know, I started organizing in the military. One, I was an intelligence analyst, so there's no way I couldn't have been politicized by both, you know, being deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. But there's also something that was going on, which was Don't Ask, Don't Tell was coming to a close. And I, as a queer woman, intimately knew that I was still not going to tell people I was gay, right? The plague of sexual violence and gendered hostility was also at a fever pitch, right? I was still in uniform in 2013 when the Air Force had the basic training mass sexual violence crisis of trainees and their TIs, right? And I remember that at that time I was volunteering as a sexual assault response coordinator. I was trying to change the curriculum so that they wouldn't have us segregated, right? Because I knew that when the dudes went into that room and we went into our room, we were having two separate conversations about what safety meant and what sexual violence meant. And I also inherently became obsessed with military corruption because as a young NCO, I saw officers that were corrupt. I saw other NCOs that were morally repugnant and shouldn't have an iota of responsibility or power. And so, you know, I testified to Congress a few years ago about my experience, but I organized other junior enlisted people in the ranks to call out the corruption in our unit because, you know, we were getting constant paperwork that was racist, constant paperwork to just shut us up because we were saying what you're doing is corrupt. You're going to get people killed, right? With your negligence and incompetence. And so my experience was really complicated, but while wanting to make change on the inside. And then, you know, I made the decision to try to do leadership development and take responsibility for veterans. Fundamentally, I believe that we are a community and a constituency in this country with significant symbolic and political power. And fundamentally, we need to make a choice because veterans can be on this call and be working for an array of solutions, or you can easily be one of the veterans that executed the Capitol attack in January, right? That represents something fundamentally different than what we stand for. And so I've taken responsibility over the last 6 years around leadership development, particularly of multiracial working class enlisted masses that are able to actually hold politicians accountable on the local level, not just on the national level. And also, what are we doing about the veterans that are in government positions that are trapped, right? The veterans that have used the propaganda of war profiteering to gain power in Congress to do what, right? So for me, it's about integrity, responsibility, equity, and undoing the screws now, right? For me, it is not a fantasy. And, you know, a lot of my leadership and a lot of my labor came in the Trump years. And I'll just say they were traumatic. It was not just a weird era. It was deeply traumatic with constant crisis response. And, you know, my colleague Triste will talk a little bit more about the shutdown Fort Hood work that we did. But we're in a rupture moment in this country and in this world where culture eats strategy for breakfast. And culture is changing very fast, right? Who gets to be an American and who does not? Who gets to be evacuated and who does not? Who gets to be saved and who is let to just decease? These things, we are living in a genocidal moment. And as heavy as that is, I have a lot of hope in us. And so I was not deterred by, we are aware, right? Organizing in the veteran space is gnarly. We have a lot of cleaning up to do within ourselves, but I believe so much in our power. And so, I believe that we must confront the supremacy and misogyny and oppression within our own communities if we want to go out and actually deliver change to our communities in the broader world, diaspora community, cross borders. And so that's what we're doing with Vets for the People, is we need to build our collective power as well and be strategic. The last thing I'll say, and I have other things, but I don't know. I know there's a lot of us on the call and we're wrapping up kind of soon, but collective power. My biggest dream for Vets for the People, so this is a project within the Working Families Party. I'm creating a whole new department, but my biggest dream is that we actually have a decentralized mass movement where everyday people find their place in our formation and do the work that is needed. And a lot of that work is not glamorous. It is literally knocking on doors and doing the deep canvassing work so that people understand that what is happening in Afghanistan, we can't scapegoat that on the Afghan people. It is our government, our political government. Both of these horrible parties that vote most closely on foreign policy need to be held accountable, and they are held accountable by the people. And our unique powers as veterans, our intellect, our humanity, because we've seen violence up close, and also our ability to mobilize. You don't need, usually other civilians, they need 300 people in front of the White House to make a news story. You don't need as many veterans. And so I believe in our ability to be disciplined, to do that honorable service that I think many of us really desired we could do, we can do now, regardless of what our military and war experiences are, because they are different. And just 5 years ago, I was in a military uniform giving briefings on the terrorist, battlefield situation in Afghanistan. 5 years ago, that was me. 2 years ago, I testified to Congress about corruption. And now today I'm sitting here figuring out how we're going to build veteran power to stop fascism in the United States. And so, this work takes a lot of humility. It's going to take all of us. And I for sure see myself as a bridge. When I came into starting to do veterans organizing, because I saw the threat of Donald Trump normalizing nationalism and mainstreaming nationalism, I didn't know what Vets for Peace was. I didn't know what About Face was. I didn't know what Winter Soldier was. And I'm thankful for the amazing comrades like Matt Howard and Maggie Martin and a lot of other folks who actually didn't have a political home or a community home, who took me by the hand and said, you belong here too. Who took me by the hand and believed in my own leadership to build and do a different role, right? Because we can play different roles while we pull on the same rope. And so I'm thankful to bridge what has been built so beautifully by the anti-war veteran movement to build into the future in a smarter, more impactful, more learned. I'm so starved to learn lessons from folks like Kelly and Jonathan, so we can also cultivate a new generation of leaders that are fighting for liberation for everyone. So I know it's a grim day. I'm excited to hear from others, but I can't lose hope in believing in us, because we got this far. And frankly, all the work and all the labor that's been done before me set us up to be more prepared now to help when we are needed.
Thank you, Pam. You are an incredible leader, and thank you for leading me as well. And I know that VFP and Veterans for the People share the same acronyms. We could also share the same members. We could wear multiple hats. I can be the executive director of Veterans for Peace, and I can make phone calls and knock on doors for Veterans for the People. So I'm ready. Just show me where I need to be. And I appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate the organization as well. So we'll get you back up here in a sec for some more conversation. Next, we're gonna bring up Triste Ordex. Triste, you did I get the name right? I've tried so hard.
Thank
okay.
you. But I appreciate it.
I know I didn't read everybody's bio. Everybody can look on the convention website and check out everybody's complete bios. But I gotta read something from yours because it was the most inspiring thing. Triste is a national organizer for the Veterans for the People, an organization under the Working Family Party umbrella. She continues to work to educate immigrant and veteran communities of their rights, engage communities of color on the electoral process, consult on campaigns to help develop veteran and Latinx outreach, and make establishment politicians uncomfortable. It's our place to remind them that they fucking work for the people. To put that in your bio is powerful. It's truthful, and I think it sends a huge message about your character and your values and what you stand for. Looking at all your work, I think I was almost connected to you for a while when we were talking about doing some immigration stuff, interconnected with some conservation mutual friends of ours, and that never really clicked off so hard. But you've done amazing work, just being an advocate for veterans around college campuses, working on immigration issues, and working on Fort Hood. To see the intersectionality of the rights of people, not even just veterans, just people, and how oppressive the military command is, and how that puts people in vulnerable situations where they can be abused and harmed and violated, and using that to challenge the entire military industry, to challenge Fort Hood and to shutting it down. I think that's immense, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but I know you have a lot to say. We do have some time, so don't rush through it. We'll get back into the panel to kind of ask one more big question that we can close on. But I know we've got Jeremiah here that can briefly sum some things up. But please take some time and walk us through some of this stuff, and why is it important now what you're doing?
Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be able to be a part of this. My name is Triste Ordex. I am the national organizer for Vets for the People. And I am a Marine Corps veteran. I retired in 2014. I'm a mom, I'm a woman of color. I'm a lot of fucking things. And one thing that I'm extremely proud of, as much as being a mother and a veteran, is I'm very fucking apologetic about what I do and about what I say, because it's so important for us to not beat around the bush with these politicians. So just a little bit of background about me. I actually started organizing with veterans and on veterans issues, and I didn't know that's what I was doing. So when I retired in 2014, I did what every veteran does, and I went to school, and I started to learn a little bit more about, just everything, politics, because what a lot of people don't realize it, veterans and military service members that are immigrant or immigrant connected, we don't grow up around politics. A lot of us don't. My family is from Mexico. When my dad came to this country, he just wanted something better for when he had his own family. I was raised by a single dad. And I remember I had fears of being deported, even though I was born here, just because my dad was undocumented. And I grew up with a lot of fear with immigration. In the town that I grew up in Oregon, there were certain areas where there would be really fucked up people that would yell "La migra," and people would run because there was so much fear. There was always deportation going on there. But when I told my dad I was joining the Marine Corps, I'll never forget, he was like, mija, aquí no quieren a los mexicanos. They do not like Mexicans here. But he's like, pero estoy orgulloso de ti, I'm proud of you. And I was kind of like, okay, you're being a little dramatic, you know, like calm down. But it wasn't until I really went through that journey in my career in the Marine Corps that I was like, wow. And even then you become so desensitized to it. And it wasn't until after I retired from the Marine Corps that I was like, what the fuck? Like, did I really go through that shit? And even still, there are things that I'm like, I can't believe that that happened to me. I'm a survivor of military sexual trauma, racism, and discrimination. We go through a lot of shit in the military, and some of it isn't gender-based, some of it isn't race-based, some of it is just fucking asshole-based, because people get into these positions of power and they abuse them and they mistreat the people that work for them. And so now the work that I'm doing with Vets for the People, I can't say enough about it. I learned about Vets for Peace actually on a trip where I met Pam in 2018. We did a border trip with other veterans, Brittany Ramos de Barros, that you all might know from About Face, that's running for Congress right now. She was there. We had some AOC organizers and veterans from her team that came out. And what was really, I don't even know how to put it into words. I had this very, very surreal feeling when I was on that border trip, because I lost my dad when I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. I was out there on a year deployment. I went home on emergency leave. And unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to make it back before he was on life support. But we did have a conversation before he passed. And, I'll never forget him telling me, how proud he was of what I was doing. And when we did that border trip, we went on what would have been my dad's birthday, the day we started volunteering, at the very border that my dad crossed. And it was very emotional. And to hear the stories of these individuals seeking asylum and wanting to just get across the border like my family did, it was something that really, really, really hit home for me in a very different way. Because it's different when you see it on TV and you resonate with it. It's different when you hear about it. But when you're actually there and they're sharing their stories with you and your own family story, it hits really hard. So that's where Pam and I met, and that's where we met. Actually, the last day we were there, we went to the wall where all the names of all the deported veterans were. And we met a gentleman there that was wearing his Vets for Peace shirt. We got a picture with him. We're able to talk about what we were doing there and the beautiful work that, Vets for Peace is doing and that we're doing, that we were doing just as organizers at the time. And last year, after I had taken some time off from organizing to, because life happens sometimes and you got to step away. I came back into the organizing space when the George Floyd protests broke out. And shortly after, Pam reached out and she's like, hey, I'm doing this Vets for the People thing. I want you to be a part of it. And I was like, I'm already there. Tell me what I need to do. And so we started with the shutdown Fort Hood work. And it's so crazy to see and relive all the things that you yourself have lived in this person's story. So when Vanessa Guillen disappeared, I very much detached myself from it because I have so much of the same identity that she did. Mexican-American, daughter of immigrants, first to serve in the military. And so for me, it was really hard to see that because all I could think was about my family. Like, who the fuck would have been there for my son, for my parents, for my siblings, had I been the one that this happened to, like Vanessa, and I've always said, when I say I'm Vanessa Guillen, I really, really mean it. And I feel it because I know what it's like to be her and walk in her shoes and be a young Latinx woman, daughter of immigrants, suffering these things in the military and not know where to fucking turn. And so I dove in and we started to do a lot of work around, you know, shutting down Fort Hood. We began with pushing the demands of the family. And from there, we went on to push just a little further and push Congress to send congressional members there so they can see for themselves what was happening. And we're able to see some great people that went and have been talking about it. And there's people that have been doing work, legislators that have been doing work around this, but it's still not enough. It's not enough. You can't whitewash this fucking issue. You just can't. And the worst part that I have noticed in the work that we've been doing with this specifically is that the congressional members are not showing up. So March 16th, there was a hearing on the Fort Hood report. The subcommittee on military personnel met. And a lot of those members or individuals that are part of that subcommittee were not there. Where the fuck were they? Because their responsibility is to us. They are our only line of defense other than ourselves. And a lot of the times, I can't even imagine me advocating for myself in the military because the one time I reported, I was asked, well, why you? And so now I think about these individuals whose basic duty is to show up. They did not show up. And there's something wrong with that. And so us at Vets for the People, those are the people that we don't need there, that we don't want there, because they are not representing the people and they are not representing us. So who do we put there? We put individuals like Garrett, like Pam, like John, like Michael to run for office because we know what it's like to live those things. And we know what it's like to have to continue to survive them every fucking day. When I first started organizing around veterans issues, the thing that's always been very near and dear to my heart is veteran suicide. And I'm sorry if I get a little emotional about this, but it's so important that these individuals not just talk about how many veterans commit suicide a day or the hundreds of veterans that attempt a day, because they're not talking about the ones that attempt, only of the ones that have died, but the ones that attempt and struggle through it every single day. It's their responsibility to make sure that we're taken care of. And if we continue to suffer this military rape culture, this military injustice, because they are not doing their damn jobs, then we need to get them the fuck out. Point blank. Me personally, I'm done playing games with them. And that's why I refuse. We live uncomfortable every day in the work that we do, having to relive our trauma because of what we organize around. So I refuse to give them any slack because they've been getting it for years. 9/11, it's been 20 years. And this rape culture has been going on even longer than that, even longer. And it's because we don't have the right people representing us. At the minimum, what we should do is register to vote and get out to vote. But if we want to do more, then we get involved with organizations like Vets for Peace, Vets for the People, About Face, other organizations that are doing amazing work, even non-veteran organizations that are just pushing voter registration and voter turnout for veterans and our families. Because it's not just about us, it's about our families as well. It's about seeing what my son has had to live because of my service and because of what I've had to struggle with my mental health because of my service. So it's about them too. So if they're not going to represent us, then let's fucking make them uncomfortable. Thank you so much for giving me the space to be able to share.
Ooh. All right. Thank you so much for being on the panel. That is just just a critical piece of what we're talking about here. Next, we're going to bring up Jeremiah Knowles. Jeremiah, you do not need to give a long answer if you don't want. I know you've been working hard all over this convention, but Jeremiah is a newish member to Veterans for Peace. You've been here long enough to kind of know a little bit of the ins and outs and the culture and the people, and I kind of call you an honorary staff member because you put in a lot of work into this organization. You're involved in the Transformative Justice Committee. You're involved in the membership committee. You're involved in Gamers for Peace. You do an amazing amount of Chapter 23 work that just won the Chapter of the Year. You put a lot of heart and soul in the organization and in this work, and a lot of it is behind the scenes stuff that a lot of folks don't see. So I want to recognize that fact. And you're putting all these hours in, and you've decided to run for the board of directors. There's actually 2 panelists running for the board. Jonathan Hutto is running for the board of directors as well, and you, Jeremiah. So there must be something about this that still has relevance, that still is meaningful. So what attracted you to both About Face and Veterans for Peace, because you're a member and leader of both, and what is that relevance that we have today?
Thank you for that question. I don't know if I would quite consider myself a leader, but I just wanted to stay involved, I actually wasn't nervous coming into this until I heard everybody else. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I doing on this panel? I have no sense of belonging here whatsoever. And then I kind of realized, looking at my question again, I had an answer, and I was like, my answer has completely changed at this point. I've rewritten some things down or redid all my notes, but I realized, I am probably the youngest person on here in terms of like veteran activism. I am just coming into this realm within the past couple of years, and it's like being on this panel is like being on the shoulder of giants. And like Pam, I was an intel analyst in the U.S. Army National Guard, and I did a tour in Afghanistan in 2008 and served as an intel analyst there with a CAV unit. Stationed in Kabul, actually, which I'm learning today is just kind of been overrun. So again, makes you start questioning what was I doing there in the first place. But a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in a very rural upstate New York town, very red. So if you're from New York at all, you understand that the only blue parts are the cities. So if you're outside any of the cities, Buffalo or Rochester or Albany or New York City, then you realize that the rest of the state's really red. So I grew up in a very conservative area, and grew up with that mentality. I considered myself very Republican, very conservative when I was younger. This is before, social media really became a thing. So my political education came from like my father and his brothers and people in that area. So of course it was influenced by that. And I signed up for the Army National Guard, of course, with mostly in mind the economic draft, came in and deployed or came in to pay for college. And then as soon as I get in and I finish AIT, I finished AIT in 2007. And then in 2008, I was right in Afghanistan. And I was like, I'm the Guard. Is this really like that quick? Like, my recruiter was like, it might be a couple years before you deploy. You'll have a little bit. I knew it was coming, but I was like, right after AIT, I don't even know the people I'm deploying with, never even drilled with them before. So I'm thrown into this unit and thrown into Afghanistan and working as a intel analyst there, you learn some things that are like, wow, is that really what's going on? So the camp I was in Afghanistan, I was on Camp Phoenix, which is right outside Kabul, and that was rented land. So we were paying a local a bunch of money just to occupy that space and build all this stuff on it. So it's like, and our mission for that camp was literally that, just occupy it, just be there. We had no other mission whatsoever than just exist in that space. And I'm like, why am I here? Like, just to exist here? I mean, at that time in 2008 in Kabul was was actually a pretty safe time. So one of our biggest threats was just someone building a dirt mound and launching off an old Soviet like mortar shell at us. Like it was, what was the threat? What am I supposed to be here doing? And so, you know, I get back from Afghanistan and I start kind of getting a little bit more political, and I start my undergraduate, and I went to SUNY Oneonta in upstate New York for teaching. And, you know, I start getting a little bit more politically aware and meeting some more people that were different from myself. And one of my best friends is he's Russian, and one of my best friends from college, they were Iraqi and from Sweden. Their parents had immigrated there when they were young, but it was just like, maybe all this conservative talk wasn't what I thought it was, you know. And so I kind of leaned more libertarian, and then became a libertarian at that time. And I'm putting that in quotations because it's like, I feel like it's a cop out, just let everybody be. But that's like the essential white perspective, right? Like I get that's white privilege in a nutshell, just being able to be like, it doesn't affect me, do what you want, you know. So I went through undergrad, completed undergrad, and then I started working for Child Protective Services. And as I was working for CPS, then I was like, oh my gosh, so the Army gets to buy me and my soldiers all this equipment, and we have these really expensive MRAPs that we like barely used when I was there because we didn't do as much, and like we have all this equipment, and my clients are like struggling just to pay rent. You know, they're struggling to find childcare. I had a mother of 7. I'll never forget this client who she was a single mom of 7 children, and she didn't have a vehicle. Who's going to have a vehicle to carry that many children? And she tried to work. She tried her hardest. She walked like 3 miles to work every single day. But she had 2 times when a babysitter didn't show up because she couldn't afford it. And then she was fired, you know. And it's learning about that disparity. I was like, oh my gosh, like, why am I, you know, why is the military able to buy all this junk, all this stuff that we barely use, and this woman's struggling to even just make it to work? It just doesn't make sense to me. And then when I worked with CPS, I went back for my master's degree, got my master's in social work, and found a love of like working in the mental health field. And once you start working in the mental health field, at least now, I'm glad that social work education has started moving in this way. There's this, they're pushing being racially aware, right? So they're encouraging people to educate themselves and really like making those connections and trying to see how I show up in different spaces as a white male, a white cisgendered male. And it was through that awakening as well where I realized my own white privilege, how you can't come to the conclusion that the wars that we have been fighting aren't racist in and of itself. I don't think you can become a racially aware white person without also making the connection that the wars and the military industrial complex and everything the DoD does across the world is not also racist. I don't think you can make that you can't not make that conclusion. So when I started becoming more racially aware, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? And then there was that quote, I can't remember it off the top of my head, that quote from Martin Luther King where he talks about the white moderate, right? And how the white moderate is probably one of the biggest detriments to the racial justice movement. And I didn't want to be that white moderate anymore, because I was, up until, you know, just a few years ago, I was that white moderate, realizing like it doesn't affect me. It doesn't bother me. I have the privilege of being white and a veteran, and like all those different things come into play. And I could just shove this under the rug, and I can just work and put my head down and just, you know, enjoy the benefits that I have. And I just, after becoming racially aware and learning those things, you just can't anymore. And so moving forward, right, I want to actually get to the question, you know, because I think my purpose here is that, like, what is going to be attracting these younger people like myself who are just getting into this? Like, what are we being attracted to? And I think it is the whole social justice movement, that racial awakening that you have. There's going to be this need for people to catch them when they come in, right? So like after George Floyd and the racial protests during that summer, I was looking for a place that like matched my identity. I'm a veteran who's now trying to be anti-racist, and like, how do I use that, veteran identity and reconcile that moral injury with my my racial identity as well. And so when I started searching around, I of course found About Face and the influence of Wendy and Brittany and Giovanni. They were just amazing people who just caught me and were like, here, yes, we got stuff you can be involved in. And then I found Veterans for Peace, and I was very fortunate to have a local chapter in Rochester. And it was just so great that there was already a group of people that existed in my local area that were already meeting, that were already doing these things, and that could catch me as I came into this movement, but also provided me the space to grow. So you and Adrian and all the Gamers for Peace crew allowed me to provided a space for me to come in and be like, okay, I'm here. What can I do to help? And there's so many opportunities to help. You almost get caught up in it all. And so I think that's the importance of Veterans for Peace and About Face and Vets for the People and all these different veteran organizations, is you got to catch people when they start waking up, and people will continue to wake up. I got out of the Army National Guard in 2012. So, I mean, Pam was still in, I think she mentioned. She got out like 2015, 16, something like that. And so I came very late to this. So that racial awakening, or that awakening into this peace movement, can happen at any time, and we got to have people there, communities there, to catch people when they start waking up, when they start coming to this movement. So I think that's what makes Veterans for Peace so crucial, is we have to be that place. That we have to be that place for veterans to be able to come to and be accepted and be encouraged and just have a community where they can be themselves. And it's very nice, the Gamers for Peace group being able to waken up with all of them, to be able to come into this movement with them, because a lot of us are new, and it's just really amazing to see that we were just so accepted and encouraged, especially by you, Garrett, who was like, yep, do it. Great. Got a good idea? Okay, that sounds awesome. How can I support you? All those types of questions was like so motivating. And if it wasn't for you and the Gamers for Peace crew especially, I probably wouldn't be continuing. The enjoyment I get out of just hanging out with people, being able to chat, play video games, but also like do the real work, has been so rewarding. So I think that answers your question for the most part. And I know I went over a little bit. Hopefully we still have some time for some questions.
Yeah, we're definitely going to go over time here. I do respect everybody's time, so if you have to drop off, I get it. But I want to make sure we just kind of go back through real fast and get some folks. Pam, I know you're stressed a little bit for time, but you wanted to make sure you heard from Kelly first. So, folks, just maybe real briefly. What are you working on now? What should we be working now? How do we got to gear ourselves for the changes coming to kind of the future of what we need for anti-militarism veteran organizing? Kelly, go ahead and go first.
Well, I will just, I guess, caveat my response with acknowledging that I haven't been very active in veterans organizing lately. I've been focusing on my professional job and my family, but I know that About Face has been involved with halting the Pipeline 3 and calling people out there to support the land defenders and water protectors there. And yeah, I think, I don't know. So I guess for me, I'm like kind of observing from the sidelines at this point and really admire and just appreciate the people who are like, it's just interesting to me to see like when we started back like so long ago with IVAW, it was like IVAW was kind of the only organization representing this new post-11 generation of veterans. And now there are all these other organizations, you know, Veterans for the People and other veterans groups, as well as like veteran contingencies within other movements, and really making those connections very clear around military policy overseas, and then how militarism impacts us at home and how it's connected with with racism, with environmental degradation, with all of these, with economic injustice, with all of these other kind of ills that are impacting us, and making those connections so that when that we don't see it as separate, as so separated. And I think that's one of the things, like initially with IVAW, I think there were like, we were trying to make some connections, like when we went down to the Gulf Coast after Katrina, and we're really making those connections around the impacts of war at home and abroad. But at the same time, it was difficult, and there was a lot of, I guess, resistance to kind of look beyond. And so I just appreciate all the new veterans that are coming in and organizing in these spaces and really looking at this as like a holistic, systemic issue, and that it's not just one thing, one conflict. So yeah, so I'll just say that, and that I would like to, of course, be more involved going forward. But my experience right now is more, I guess, of the past and what we did at that point.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for being on the panel. Pam?
Okay, lots of thoughts. Really, really thankful to be here. I think I'm leaving this panel just being reminded of how much power and knowledge we hold. Even just on this call, there's 99 people on this call that know so much. And listening to Jeremiah, you know, the best leaders often don't see themselves as leaders, they see themselves as doers. And we really need a community of doers more than ever. People that are just going to pick up the trash because they see it there, people that are going to do the unsexy things. And that's what we're made of. So, you know, there's 99 folks on this call, and do not forget your personal power. Do not forget our collective power. Just a few of us could do a lot. I say that, and my next thing is we got to be real that it's going to take a lot of us, right? Because the problems that we face are many. This is an absorption moment. There are so many Afghanistan veterans. There are so many Vietnam era veterans. There are so many folks across gender, across experience that are feeling this moment, this moral crisis, this crisis of consciousness that we're watching right now in real time, that are looking for a political home, that are looking for political education, that are looking to understand what is organizing, how do I use my voice, how do I do it in a way that is responsible, right? Whether you're a military veteran that did not experience high levels of trauma in military or war, or if you're a veteran that, you know, intimately understands that cost. Are we going to be a movement that welcomes the many to defeat the few against us, right? Because that's what this is about. It's about us centering the many, centering the most harmed, to really defeat the few in power that are keeping us in the cycle of death. And so education is going to be important. Absorption is important. We need to get people into these organizations fast. We need to get organized. We're already living in such a crisis moment. But believe me when I tell you that next year is going to be harder. We're going to see a rise of mainstreaming nationalism that will make it harder for us and for our communities. And so let's start now. Let's start thinking about how we make organizing part of our life. And it doesn't have to be with just in the street. but, you know, spreading the good word. And if you think that something needs to be cleaned up in some of these vets organizations, sign yourself up to do that work, because it can't just be on Garrett. It can't just be on Jeremiah. It can't just be, right? All of us have to actually take ownership and responsibility if we're going to make these organizing vehicles good for the next generation, regardless of age or background. And the last thing I'll say is my 2 cents, right? It's my experience, and what I'm thinking about is this is not a left-right battle. We really need to see that we, all of us, are actually on top of this clusterfuck of a system that is killing us, right? We must actually look at this through the lens of top versus bottom, right? It is the many who are suffering versus the few at the top, right? We understand this. Our agenda is popular with people right now. And so let's not be self-defeatist. Let's not put ourselves in boxes that we don't need to be in while being responsible, right? We don't have to be put in boxes on understanding that me and Garrett do not have the same life experience, and struggling together is going to be a give and take, right? And I am committed to putting in that labor and work, but we all must get real clear that accountability starts with self. And so I look forward to building a better future with all of you in any way that we can, in any way that we are planted. And so that's just my plea for this group. I'm excited to see the next era of Vets for Peace. You know, someone mentioned you've never heard of Vets for the People, and it's because we've only been in existence for 1 year, punching up above our weight. But if you want to get in touch with us, follow us on social media. And if you want to get in touch with our organizing team, it's VETS, VETS @workingfamilies.org. You can also text VETS, VETS to 30403, and we'll put it in the chat.
Thanks again, Pam. Feel free to drop, and hopefully we'll get Veterans for the People to lead a lobbying training in February at our SOVA gathering in Washington, D.C. to do some lobbying efforts for saving the VA and stop privatization. So we'll try to make that happen. So you might see Pam and some of her colleagues up there if you're gathering in DC in February. Jonathan, I know you're pressed for time. I'm going to hop to you next. How do you answer this question? What's next? What's coming up? What do we got to do?
All right, very, very quick. Thank you, Garrett. Thanks again to everyone that labored, pulled us together, and to all the panelists and to everyone. Great. It's awesome when you got nearly 100 people for the entire session. That speaks volumes. You know, as an undergraduate student at Howard University, you'll hear me talk about Howard ad nauseum at times. It's not so much for the institution of Howard, but just for the social milieu and the environment at that time. February 17th, 1998, undergraduate student, I introduced the late Kwame Ture, known to my family's generation as Stokely Carmichael, to his alma mater for his last fireside chat. That night, he said some words that bathed my brain and my veins and became just woven within my organizing DNA. And one of the pieces he left with us is that he said, he stated that the struggle is eternal. He defined the struggle as the basic qualification of life. That in the absence of struggle, this is bringing the spirit of Frederick Douglass forward, that in the absence of struggle, there is no progress. And so the struggle is eternal. That is to say that from a movement perspective and from the perspective, and this is in no way marginalizing the need for folks to take care of themselves, what have you. We have to do that, but just understand and understand that none of us are indispensable to the struggle. So we decide to make a contribution to it, but the struggle is ever on. With that being stated, that there's really no time for our struggle to relax. There is no time for our struggle to relax. That the more we struggle, the more we know. The more we know, the more we can do. And our people are going to need us to do until we die. So in terms of what I've been engaged in, I separated honorably from the United States Navy in 2011, August 16th, after 7 years, 7 months, and 1 day. A year later, we know it took place in Sanford, Florida, with the snatching of that Black life, Trayvon Martin, and the deep organizing. That was the launch of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now I'm at age 35 at that time, having organized against police repression and racism a decade prior in the early 2000s. And so coming forward, I'm organizing here locally where I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, through a coalition of organizations and activists. I helped to form the Prince George's People's Coalition, which stayed deeply involved and also work in Washington, D.C., particularly with the housing crisis, Washington, D.C., ground zero for Black displacement in the country. But one of the pieces I want to focus us to is not solely the struggle externally, which is definitely primary, but even more primary than that is our struggle internal within ourselves. We're not going to beat anyone collectively if we can't beat ourselves. And so I want to state that I'm bringing forth another principle. And I actually, at a testimonial dinner for Kwame Ture, I heard this from one of his comrades, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, known to my mother's generation, H. Rat Brown, when he stated that one of the greatest shortcomings, he stated, of his generation, that was the civil rights, Black Power, anti-Vietnam War generation, was he stated they were emulating, he felt the movement was emulating the very people that they were struggling to overcome, some of their morals and their values and their dictates. And so with that being stated, just piggying back on some of the earlier themes and principles, we're gonna have to struggle harder to turn to each other and not on each other. We're gonna have to struggle harder to create some space for ourselves, some safe space. But when we create safe space, that doesn't mean that we don't battle on issues. But let's be clear that we battle on issues, that we're battling issues, we're battling content. We're not battling each other. Okay, our movement doesn't have to be uniform to be unified. Okay, our movement is not monolithic. Okay, and the type of unity that I'm speaking of, our opponents, our adversaries, let's just be more straightforward than that, our enemies. Okay, they practice an operational unity that we need to not only model, we need to master. Okay, when we look at January 6th, if you really look at it, it looked monolithic, but it really wasn't. It was a plethora of groups out there. And so I just want to put that forward to us, that as we struggle to move forward, let's not weaponize against each other as we have. And I'm talking broadly in the movement. You know, this is what I felt. I had felt this. I'm gonna end here, Gary. I've felt this for about the last 7-8 years now, the weaponizing, especially around identity-based struggles on different levels. So I just want to just say it again. Turning to each other, not on each other, being better, not always bitter. If you need to take a break, a step back, do so. And we can come back, bring your full self as best you can, because it's a long haul, it's a long struggle, and it's gonna go beyond our very lives. And so with that being stated, I want to be in a long haul with everyone. Thank you. This has been awesome. And we're gonna press ever onward, ever forward.
All right, Jonathan, I'm glad that you're on our side, because that's I can learn so much listening to you all the time. So thanks for your guidance, and I'll be hitting you up one way or another for your advice all the time. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Triste, I want to bring you back up here, because I don't know what your schedule is, but you tipped on a lot, and I feel like it was the tip of the iceberg with what you need to say. So I want to hear more about aligning our whole movement, because we could look at our individual organizations and talk about that, but we really do have this large left veteran movement, and we need to coordinate together and work together and figure out which tools are doing the right thing at the right time and how we can support each other. As a whole anti-militarism veteran movement, what's urgent right now?
So what's most urgent is to find our people. We need to find them. We need to go where they're at and find them. And that's what I love about what we're doing with Vets for the People, because we're meeting veterans where they're at. In last week, Pam and I were in DC We met veterans out there. We actually met a gentleman that was a part of the DC Vets for Peace chapter. And you know what, and then this week we went to Pennsylvania. We were in Philly. We did the Can't Wait concert for jobs, care, and climate. So we're meeting veterans where they're at. We've been to Texas. We're going to Georgia, in other battleground states. Here in Florida, where I'm at, in Orlando, I've been doing work out here. So that's what we need to do to start, is meet them where they're at and bring them in and show them. Because I'll tell you, like, my own experience, I talk to a lot of Marines about this, because a lot of us are either very fucking left or very right. And I know that when people meet me, they're like, you're a Marine and you're a liberal? I'm like, yes. Have you seen the color of my skin? Have you heard me speak? Like, I have an accent. I speak Spanish. I am very much a Latina. But I'm also a veteran. And I want to bring all these other identities of who I am, along with my veteran identity, in a space. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to testify in front of the Florida State Legislature. And one thing that I told them when they were trying to pass this censorship bill, this anti-protest bill, was not all veterans look like Ron DeSantis. Not all of them. Some of them look like me. Some of them look like other individuals, Black and brown representatives that aren't in the state legislature. And we need to remind the American people of that. And so what I would say is that what we're looking for right now too is for veterans who organize for multiracial democracy, racial justice, and voting rights in the 60s through the 80s, to bring them in to be a part of this, so that way we have an array of individuals with different experiences to bring to the table, so that we do not repeat the same things. Because a lot of the stuff that's happening with these wars is shit that's being repeated. It's corruption, it's greed, and we're getting back into these wars because of those very things. Not to mention the fucked up people we have in office. So this history of repeated behavior of so much toxicity is what is contributing to the fucked up shit that the military is happening in the military and that the military is doing. And then that comes out when we leave the military. Look at what happened on January 6th. How many veterans showed up? And it was emotional for me to start walking up towards the Capitol and see things boarded up and things blocked off. Because when I was there in 2019 lobbying and talking about our border trip, it was different. And so to come back and be like, shit, I cannot believe, like, we can't even get in and talk to our very own representatives if we wanted to. And so we want to make sure that we start to push what it is that we're doing with Vets for the People. We're here, we're building a political home for individuals like you, Black, brown, Indigenous, immigrant connected, queer and trans individuals that identify with working class values, working class people, and that want to get out of these fucked up wars and want to end the toxic culture of the military. Because like I tell people, I have a 16-year-old and I know he's going to be the target of recruiters. He already has been. But how can I make it better? People are going to join. And I can try to do everything I can to stop it. But for those that do join, like I did blindly, what can I do to make that shit better? What can I contribute to it? And this is what we're doing. We're holding military leaders accountable. We're making sure that they know that they are not untouchable, because they're not. And who better to be in the space and hold them accountable than those who have served and those who are serving? We're the ones that are going to be out there calling them out on the shit that they're doing wrong and making sure that they make these wrongs right. And if they refuse to do it, then we'll run against them, or we'll organize against them. But there's a lot of work to be done. And like, you know, my partner in power said, Pam, we need you. We need you. Be a part of what we're doing. And there's so many amazing organizations out there that are doing great work. How do you connect to them? You can connect with us, with Vets for the People. If you want to get into electoral work, you can connect with other organizations that are doing more like resource-based work, like Not in My Marine Corps or Invisible Combat, Vets for Peace. There's a lot of great organizations out there doing some amazing things. How can we contribute to them? If you don't have time, but you have the means, then donate. If you don't have the means, but you have the time, then give a little bit of time. And time doesn't mean just, you know, I need you to show up and go knocking on doors or hand out flyers or volunteer at this event. It also means following us and sharing the information that we post. That's how we help one another out. And that's how we get the message out, is by making sure that we're putting out there what each individual organization is doing, because we're all contributing in a different way. And if you really want to get involved and throw down in elections, you know, election season's coming up, I'm your girl to talk to. Set up a one-on-one with me, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about how you can get involved, because we are going to be activating veterans in Texas and Florida and Georgia and Pennsylvania. We're excited to get involved in some Pennsylvania races. We got an amazing Navy veteran that is running in Dallas, Texas. I'm excited to throw down with her. And there's a lot of badass veterans that are progressive, that are pushing for the same things that we want, and we need to support them. Donate to their campaigns, follow them, share their information, because when we get the right people up there, we're going to be able to push more and be able to hold more people accountable and get rid of individuals that don't have our best interest.
You know, I'm trying to imagine a conversation you're having with anybody in the world, even your closest family members, that doesn't sound like a mic drop. It's so much power.
Thank you so much. When it comes to my work, I fucking love what I do. And I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I love. And I'm thankful for Pam for bringing me into Vets for the People, because, you know, I have a lot of things that I'm working through with my service in the military, but I've been able to work through a lot of that stuff through the work that I'm doing with other people. My way of healing is through action, and everybody has a certain way that they heal. But mine is through action. And yes, we've been through some fucked up shit. I've been through some fucked up shit, but I will tell you that I've gotten so much more clarity, and I've been able to heal in so many different ways because of the people that I've been able to help. And people that have helped me have also helped me heal. Pam helped me so much. And other veterans involved have, you know, throughout the years have reached out to me and shown me love. And I appreciate that. And that's what we need to do. Like, I'm very much one of those people. Be kind to others and be kind to yourself. Because, you know, as powerful as we may be, sometimes we go through hard times, and we go through depression, we go through a lot of different emotions, and, you know, we need to make sure that we're taking care of each other. So for every single person that's on here, please be sure that you're taking care of yourself. Drink water, hydrate, and whatever you need to do to get into that headspace that, you know, gives you clarity and peace. Make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Thanks again for being part of this. Right. Let's Michael, bring you back. I know you're working on some new projects right now. Can you tell us about those? And maybe you know, I feel like you have a crystal ball. So like, help us out and project to the future. What do we need to do?
Sure. Well, you know, personally, I'm still very much an activist, as much as I can be. You know, I'm producing that anti-imperialist educational content for our show called The Empire Files, which you can find on YouTube. And as I mentioned, just by virtue of that, I'm always in touch with active duty people who are trying to get out of the military. And so I think that's been one of the great honors for me, is that because of the work I've done in the past and some content I've created, that, you know, I somehow am a gateway for people to contact me and then try to get out of the military. So it's mostly just pointing them in the right direction to groups like About Face and VFP, Courage to Resist, and other support networks that already exist. But in terms of the next project I'm working on, something in that vein of ways to connect issues together, but find other gateways for soldiers and veterans into the struggle for a better world, is I'm currently working on a new film project with my partner, Abby Martin. It's called Earth's Greatest Enemy. I'll drop the link in the chat, but it's a film about how the biggest danger to survivability on the planet, the environment, this horrible IPCC report that just came out, that was a real red alert, is the US military, pollution caused by the US military, destruction of environments, ecosystems, by base construction, all these vehicles, all that stuff. We're doing a big feature film about that. And just since we've announced, and put out a teaser that we're making this film, we've gotten, a couple dozen responses from active duty and vets saying they want to blow the whistle on all the crazy pollution and stuff that they saw in the military. And so already that's working as a way to kind of bring people in to the struggle who may not have been reached before. And so I'll drop the link for people to find out more about that project in the chat. We're working on that full time now. But I do want to say, if you're asking about a crystal ball, I mentioned that there's always going to be crises and conditions that present themselves that allow us to base build in the military and among veterans, in particular young veterans. And of course, there's a variety of them that face us now. I mean, the anti-racist upsurge that started with George Floyd, massively significant, still ongoing. The environment, something that's growing. I mean, there's all these struggles where there are avenues to connect it to militarism. And we always want to find issues that are galvanizing people and getting people into motion and politically conscious and connect those to war and militarism. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be another war crisis. And we absolutely have to be prepared for another war crisis. Now, I know that we're seeing that the Afghanistan war today, the Taliban right now are in the presidential palace. They're getting ready in the next day or so to announce that full control of Afghanistan. The president of Afghanistan has fled. And even though this was the desire of the Pentagon wanted this withdrawal. It looked really bad to be losing a war in Afghanistan for 20 years. The Biden administration wanted this withdrawal, knowing that the Taliban were going to take over. Still, the media elites, the think tanks, all of the powerful voices in this country, they're all really upset because it's a big humiliation. I mean, seeing the U.S. puppet governments fall so quickly, so now the anniversary of 9/11, which was supposed to be this victory celebration for the Biden administration of we ended the war and we have this stable government, that's the 9/11 is going to be the government that was in power on 9/11 2001 is now back in power. So the elites of this country, those in power, it's embarrassing for the empire, and they can't really accept that. And there's going to be desire for redemption. And that we can already see, since Biden has come into office, and these policies are very much extended from Trump, but regime change operations against popular socialist governments in Cuba and Venezuela, continued genocidal aggression in Yemen. But more, I think the bigger warning is potential for escalation with Iran, of course. But, the U.S. is constantly pushing towards a war with China. They have this in their doctrine, this great power confrontation. I mean, all the officers going to school at West Point right now, they're all training for this kind of confrontation, and they're all trying to make it happen. For example, the United States is very much pressuring all of these countries in Asia. Asia is trying to be like a region of peace and cooperation with China. And pressuring, countries like Vietnam and others to actually make it a zone of conflict, to make Asia and the seas around it to be a place of conflict and confrontation with China. The United States is very much pushing for that to happen. And so I think that it's amazing that we're seeing that finally the forever wars seem to be really coming to an end in a major way. But the nature of this system is to find new places to expand, to redeem themselves, and so forth. And so I think in the wake of this defeat in Afghanistan, the final nail in the coffin for the US and Afghanistan, I think we need to be even extra vigilant about what is this government going to do to try to erase the embarrassment of the failure that we're seeing just right now unfold. And we don't know where that's going to be, but we just have to know that is on the horizon, that is in the future. And so all of the work we do in the day-to-day, we also have to be ready for preparing ourselves for that next upsurge in the anti-war struggle, because it could happen at any moment. I gave that example of the step towards war with Iran you know, that just when it seemed like we would go to war with Iran, there was an explosion of anti-war sentiment in the country, and especially in the military, more than I had ever seen before in all of my time doing this kind of work. And I think that that would be a similar reaction if we take another step towards war somewhere else. And of course, there's a lot of places the US has its sights on. But thanks for having me and inviting me, and really honored to be on a panel with so many other great people.
Thanks, Michael. And I imagine we'll invite you out to a Gamers for Peace thing
Ready.
soon. All right.
We're playing Overwatch. I'm there.
Woo. All right. Thanks, Michael. Always good to have that kind of big picture outlook of things. Frank, you're going to end this thing. I know this might give you kind of a little bit of a nervousness after this panel, but you've been a mentor to our generation of veterans for a long time, and we're not letting you go. We need our mentors, and we deserve good mentors. And we're gonna hold high standards for our mentors, because we deserve to be guided by some powerful, strong veterans. So what is next, especially looking at your generation of veterans? You know, you still have a place in this thing. You still have a role to play. What is it, and what do we need to do?
Well, Garrett, thank you for giving me that call a couple of months about coming on it. This is I needed this. You know, I was talking to you, saying, you know, I missed the yearly live conventions, because you're talking about me, my generation, but particularly me. I'm a very intense individual. I get overwhelmed, I get hopeless over the year, but then I always come back, and the Vets for Peace is where that happens. And I'm missing that, you know, connection with folks and getting, you know, reconnected and reinvigorated. And this is doing that for me today. These folks here, wow. So much being said has got my mind's racing a mile a minute this last hour. Listen to everybody here. There is, it's all about picking for me, like, you know, picking some area to, you know, like privatization of the VA, or like right now, we're talking a lot about vet suicide and what can we do together here in Philly, you know, which is just another piece of, you know, what we do, what our mission is of, you know, connecting, making all the connections, and getting folks to see, you know, the cost of wars, and, you know, and so right now, you know, I'm getting you know, just reinvigorated by you folks, and it's really been good for me today. You know, maybe, you know, just get me more revved up to come back to the chapter, and maybe get us going in some, you know, around something, you know, maybe the VA, maybe, or actually folks are talking a lot about, you know, awareness of vet suicide. And I definitely want to, you mentioned coming to Washington in February, lobbying. I'm going to keep up with that one. You said there might be some workshops and things. Yeah,
we're gonna do a SOVA gathering, Save Our VA, to try to do some education and lobbying around stopping the privatization of the Veterans Affairs.
All right. Yeah. I've been like Kelly lately. I've been more focused on just, you know, our lives, Sharia and I's life here, and my gardening and things like that. I've gotten beat down pretty good by the last 4 years. I mean, I get triggered too easily, and I just get, you know, what we're all looking at now, that Triste was saying, you know, it's going to be worse next year. Like what we're seeing now, this nationalism, this white supremacy, it's out there, man, who we are, this country, what we're up against. And it's tough. But now I'm doing a real good flip around here today about, instead of just looking for ways for me just to not know what's going on. That's where I've been going, and which is impossible for us. And you know, I'm flipping around and say, all right, I'll get back on the road and get back doing what we do. You know, I think probably there's, you know, a lot of the folks, us the older Vets for Peace guys are, you know, I think a lot of us go through that when we come to the conventions each year. We do come away, you know, revitalized, and so there's probably a lot of guys my age that are folks, feeling that. But I've been telling you, this is doing it for me right here today. So thanks for bringing me on here, Garrett. It's been a good day.
Thank you, Frank. And thanks for everybody for sticking with us for so long. I know we're way over time, and we need to go kind of freshen up, get some food, and before this closing ceremony. We still got a lot of day left. But this has been a fantastic panel. Frank, thank you for holding it down on the historic perspective. And we need y'all. This is an intergenerational struggle. And if you look at 20 years since 9/11, 20 years before 9/11 was 1981. There wasn't even a Veterans for Peace then. And now here we are 20 years later after 9/11. Yeah. So all this history and all this work that post 9/11 veterans have been doing under the mentorship and leadership and help of y'all's generation and the generations before that is an incredible history. And we got to stop and we have to recognize that, because I think a lot of us look at post 9/11 veterans as the new hotness. Well, we've been around for organizing for a little under 20 years now with y'all. So there's history in and of it itself, and we're collaborating with everybody. Let's move this forward, and everybody take a good break. Thank you for the panelists. Thanks for everybody for sticking with us, and we'll see y'all at the closing ceremony.
Great panel you put together, Garrett. Thank you for your work here.